Okay, Cubo. Bienvenidos. Okay, so I lived in Colombia about 25 years ago in Bogota, so it's good to be back. Welcome, everyone. Who in here would consider them, so if you want to come up and talk to me afterwards in English or Spanish, hablo un poquito. Who in here would consider themselves an introvert? So welcome. So introvertido or introverted, typically someone who would rather deal with a computer than a human. We're going to talk about how to, if you are someone who falls in that boat, how you might maybe start a side business or start a consulting business, something that might be a little overwhelming, or how would I even do this if it's really hard for me to come up and talk to someone. So I want to talk about some of those tips here. So just briefly about me, so I'm from Gringolandia. I ran the Utah Python group there for, ¿Me pega bien? Mejor? Okay. I've written multiple books on Python. I do a bunch of training for O'Reilly. I also run a company called Medellin that does corporate training where I will go in and teach basically large corporations who want to learn Python or data science, how to leverage those technologies, and I also do consulting through that company as well. So again, Metasnake, the idea there is to take someone who knows how to program and teach them Python, take someone who knows some Python and get them better in Python, take someone who's maybe using Excel or wants to do pandas or machine learning and sort of push them through that track. I also do consulting, so I've listed various consulting projects that I've done, and all sorts of machine learning, AI, planning, to even minimum viable product. I sometimes dabble in web, so Django and Flask. Okay, so here's a little bit about me. I live in Utah, so two days ago in Utah, it snowed this much in my house. So I like to ski. That's my son who likes to ski. Utah is also a desert, so this is, I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is the desert a couple hours from my house. So these are things I like. I like to be outside, enjoy the outside. These are things that I don't like. So sales, I don't consider myself necessarily a great salesperson. Also I like to talk to people, but I'd prefer talking to people on a small scale, not large groups. That's something that I would consider myself introverted. I can do that, but I prefer sort of the smaller groups. So how do we overcome that? If you want to consult or do work for someone else, you sort of have to overcome these. So I want to give you some hints to do that. And I would just say, maybe advice for a youngster, if you think consulting is like the way to riches or whatnot, I would say go work for a company that rhymes with one of these. That's maybe a more sure path to more money if that's your goal. Also take my words with a grain of salt. So when I graduated from school, the fellow that I did my senior project with, he went to work for Apple. This was in the year 2000. I think Apple's stock was about $5 right then. He's still at Apple, so quite well. After my first job, I worked for a search company doing natural language processing and that sort of thing. That was during the dot-com bust. That company sort of folded or went through many rounds of layoffs. A good number of the engineers from that company went to work for Google before Google's IPO, and most of them are still at Google. So I've sort of gone non-conventional and sort of stuck on smaller type things. So you may not want to take career advice from me, because apparently I've made some bad choices, but hindsight is 20/20. Let me tell you some of the things that you can leverage. And I prefer not to dwell on the past per se, because I want to be optimistic about the future. So consulting is basically people paying you for your expertise. You have some expertise or knowledge, and people want to leverage that. And so in order for them to leverage that, they have to find out about your expertise. It's not any good if you have studied something, or you're an expert in something, and no one knows about it, and no one can find you. So you need to get yourself out there. Why might consulting be a good path for you? So consulting can be a range of things. It can be full-time consulting. It can be sort of part-time consulting. There are a lot of consulting gigs where you're doing something in the evening or on the night or on the weekend, and people will pay you for that, so you can get some extra money for that. If you know certain technologies and you're very good at them, you can make a lot of money consulting doing that. Also, if you value your time or you want to be in charge of your time, maybe a better way to say that, consulting is one way that you get to be the boss. You get to be the best boss in the world. You probably are also the worst boss in the world. So that's what I consider myself. You also get to do what you want. You get to choose what you want to do. If you don't want to take a job, you don't have to. Why not? Why would you maybe not want to do consulting? So again, if you are someone who's sort of afraid of humans, interaction, doing sales and marketing, putting yourself out there might be annoying. Running a company is actually a little bit harder than working for someone else. There's a lot of overhead to running a company. And also, it seems like there's a lot of other people who are doing consulting, so it can be a race to the bottom depending on what your technologies you're in, because there are maybe a lot of people who are willing to do it for a cheaper price than you. So first order, and this is somewhat US-centric. I imagine similar things apply in other countries. So at least in the US, get an accountant. That's a person who can sort of help you get started. In the US, you form what's called an LLC, a limited liability company, which is relatively easy to do, and then put it on LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, it's going to be hard for people to find you. So you gotta do these sort of first order things. Another thing, that, and again, this might be US-centric, is health insurance. If you're solo, you need to provide your health insurance. I have found that having someone help you do that can get you better health insurance for cheaper, at least in the US. So your mileage may vary in other places. Okay, so this is a slide that I stole from Drew Conway. He was talking about data science, and he gave this is the Venn diagram of data science. You know, you ask 10 people what a data scientist is, you get 10 different answers. But he says it's sort of the intersection of having some statistical knowledge, some programming knowledge, and some expertise knowledge. So I'm going to sort of steal this and apply it to consulting. What are 3 things that you can do to be a consultant? Bless you. Salud. I'm going to say your attitude. I think, you know, if you are introverted, you might have the attitude like, oh, there's no way I can talk to someone. They aren't going to want to work with me because I'm not very good with people. So that's something that you need to work on. It's a skill, and you can learn to interact with people. And I would also say you need to invest in yourself. So I'll talk about what I mean by investing in yourself and then investing in others. So let's talk about attitude first of all. The first thing I think that's important about attitude is your mentality. A lot of people, when they look at consulting, are like, oh, there's Python is the most popular language right now. Everyone is learning it in school. There's going to be so much Python programmers out there. Why would I even bother to do that? And if you want to feel that way, you can, but it's not going to help you get work. It's not going to help you get a job. So I prefer to think of it, so I ran the Utah Python group for 5 years, and while I was doing that, I interacted with a lot of recruiters, people who are looking to hire companies, like, oh, how do I hire? And at least in what I've seen in the United States, and again, I can't really speak to Colombia. I haven't done a lot of consulting in Colombia, but in the United States, basically, if you have a heartbeat and you know how to talk and you know how to program, you should be able to get a job, okay? There's so much work, and there's such a limited supply of people who can do that work that there is more than enough work to go around. So, and that's just in the Python sort of data science area where I'm in, but I know a bunch of people who are in tech, and there is a dearth of people who can do tech. So have the mentality that there is a lot of work out there. I'm going to go out and get it. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little story here about some guy who had a friend, and his friend was going to all these conferences and speaking, getting invited to all these conferences, and this guy was like, oh, I wish I would do that. No one's inviting me to conferences. Well, it turned out that the reason no one's inviting this person to conferences is because this person never stepped a foot out, never tried to speak at conferences. And so this person happens to be me, sort of flipped that around and said, if I want to speak at a conference, the first thing I have to do is I have to put myself out there. I have to propose and get a talk. And so that can be a little bit overwhelming, but a lot of what we see in like the Twitter sphere or in Hacker News or wherever is you see these outliers or super successful people, and they're successful because they've done certain things, and a lot of times they don't talk about what they've done. You just sort of see their success and you're like, there's no way I can do those things because you haven't seen what's happened behind the scenes. So if you want to do something, you have to figure out what they're doing and make goals to do that. Now, having said that, I would say that as an introverted person, that simply going to a conference, for me, I think, is kind of a waste of time if I'm just going to go to a conference. I mean, maybe less so now, but like if I were starting off and I just go to a conference, I'd sort of just, I'm going to go in the back, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to listen to someone, and then I'm going to leave. And there's some value in that, you might learn something, but the real value in going to a conference is being able to network and find other people who are using similar things that you are or want to leverage what you are. So I would say for me right now, now if I go to a Python conference, I know a bunch of people, so it's not a waste of time, but when I was starting out, it kind of was a waste of time. And so I don't really go to a lot of conferences unless I'm speaking there. So speaking at a conference is completely different. And I realize this can be really overwhelming if you've never done it, so start small, work at something, a local user group or meetup before you start at a conference. And it can still be maybe nerve-wracking when you start off. But speaking at a conference is a different experience. It's going to put you in a position of authority, whereas rather than you having to come up to someone and say, I want to talk to something, or my name's this, people are going to come up to you and say, hey, I have a question, I want to talk about this. And it sort of flips the table. You have people come to you and you get to meet people without putting as much effort. So I think that's a hack that you can do. If you want to meet people, but maybe you're nervous about it, flip it around. Make it so that people want to come and meet you. I'll just put this out there as well. I expect, and this is maybe my attitude, but I expect that I will get business from this talk that I'm doing here. Doesn't mean that I'm going to walk out of here with one you saying, hey, I want to get business, but I expect that somewhere down the line, some connection or something that happened at this conference, I will get business from it somehow. And I'm not trying to say that to gloat or say that I'm a good person or whatnot, but that's just the mentality that you have to have. If you're investing in a conference, you need to invest. That's not just an investment of time, but it needs to be an investment in your company and an investment in growing your clientele or your business or whatnot. Okay, where do I get most of my work? I get pitched all the time on LinkedIn for, I need someone to do training, I want some consulting or whatnot. But 90% of my work and 90% of the jobs that I've taken have not come from someone cold calling me or whatnot. They have come from people who I have met or who I've networked with. So I can't overemphasize this enough, that your network is your power and your leverage. If you want a new job or if you want a better job, go out to a meetup, start meeting with other people who are doing what you want to do, and just go up and ask them, hey, I'm curious about your job. I'm in this position. What do you think I should do to get that? That is the best way to get work. I mean, if my consulting and training stuff ran out, I would probably, use social media or whatnot, but I would imagine through my network, I would be able to get a job basically. And a lot of times I've gotten jobs that aren't listed per se. These are jobs that someone's like, oh yeah, I will give you this job because I want to work with you. One other thing just about attitude in general is you need to have goals. So you can say, oh, it's great that I want to speak or whatnot, but it's better to, if you just say, oh, I want to speak, I want to be a speaker, that would be awesome. Well, if you just think that that's going to be awesome, that's great, but it probably won't happen. Better would be to say, I want to speak at a conference in 6 months. So what do I need to do in the next month to prepare for that? Write down on a piece of paper, stick it in your mirror, whatnot. I'm going to speak at a conference for 6 months, and then reverse engineer what you need to do to speak at a conference in 6 months. Maybe it's, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to spend a month doing that. Write down that date. Then I'm going to propose to talk about this at a local meetup. And you're going to propose it, you're going to talk to the whoever, and you're going to have that date. So have these dates down there, and a goal that is not written down is a goal that you probably won't achieve. But something that you see and you can revisit is something that you can do. Okay, so that is my attitude spiel. Let's talk about investing in yourself. So I'm going to tell you another story. So there's this company called Pluralsight. Has anyone heard of Pluralsight? A couple people. So Pluralsight does training videos, and they happen to be located, the headquarters was basically like 5 minutes away from my house. And about 8 years ago, there was this person who really liked Python and was approached from Pluralsight to do their first Python course. At this time, they were heavily into .NET, and that was sort of their bread and butter, .NET. And they're like, we want to invest in Python. And so this person happens to be me, decided, hey, okay, yeah, that sounds great. I'll do a video on Python, and I'll do that. And I submitted a video, and I submitted it, and it got rejected. Got rejected because I was using Linux at the time, and they're like, Linux, what is this? We are a Windows shop. So if someone sees Linux on our screencast, they're going to be like, oh, how can I do this? I need something that's point and click. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, if you're like that, I mean, most people I know are fine with the command line. But so we sort of like, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Turns out that the person who eventually got that gig of the Pluralsight video, it's one of the top 5 videos on all Pluralsight. And so this person is making quite a bit of money because they got that. So my point in here is buy and use the correct tools. And that doesn't mean that Linux is bad. I still use Linux. It doesn't mean that Linux is bad, but it means that if your client needs something done and they want it in a certain tool or want using a certain tool, invest the time or the money to get that tool and view it as an investment in yourself. This is sort of like a regret. Yeah, I should have done that. Live and learn, though. Okay, let me tell you another story here about investing in yourself. So after I started speaking at conferences, I pitched PyCon about 12 years or so ago, or 14 years ago, a tutorial, and the idea of that tutorial was this is how I would want to learn Python if someone was teaching Python. So that was my tutorial. It got accepted to PyCon, and I gave it. It was great. You know, it was sold out. Everyone loved it, it seemed like. And I got accepted to give that talk at another conference, and I thought rather than just rewrite my slides, I'm going to take the content of that and I'm going to write it in a book. I'm going to put it in a book form. And so it turns out that is pretty easy. That book has changed over the years, but it is now this book right here. But book publishing is a really great way to get yourself out there. Right now, it's very easy to self-publish and create your own book. So, sure, there is effort in doing that, but then one of the nice things about writing a book is, especially if you're an introvert, is like you don't have to talk to anyone. It's just you and your computer. You can write your book. But once you write your book, and it can be about Python or it can be whatever you want, this is like an awesome business card. You can go to a meetup and you can say, like, I want to talk about whatever, machine learning. They're like, how can you talk about machine learning? They're like, here's my book. I can talk about machine learning. And they're like, okay, yeah, cool, you wrote a book. We'll let you talk about it. So self-publishing is really easy. I'll give you another hint. If you want to be published by a big-name publisher, big-name publishers are always hungry for material. But sometimes as someone who's unknown, they might not want to publish you, or you might do a pitch for them, and they're like, no, we'll pass on that because you're sort of an unknown. Well, if you self-publish a book, and it does well, and you can prove that it does well, you can take that book and you can come to them after and say, hey, here's my book. It's not only done well in the English market, I have sold the Russian translation rights, and they've sold 1,000 copies in Russia, and I've had multiple publishing houses come up to me after the fact and say, I want to publish your book or buy the rights to your book. So if you're interested in publishing, or that sounds interesting to you, this is a nice little hack. Start off with self-publishing, and then if you want to pitch that to get a real publisher, you can do that as well. So the gist here is that you need to find some topic or area where you can become a leader, but you can't just become a leader in your house, in your room, or in your office cubicle. You have to become a leader such that other people hear about you and know about you. Another option to invest in yourself is what I call the onion skin of open source participation. So who here uses open source software? Should see all hands going up, except for those super introverted ones who don't want to raise their hand. Okay, so open source software, that is a great way to leverage yourself. And there are sort of various levels of what I call participation. And so if you think of an onion, if you cut an onion in half, not only does it make your eyes water, but you can sort of peel away, my kids like to peel away the different layers of the onion. And so compare that to an open source project. Maybe the outer layer here is like, I've heard of something. The next layer is, I'm going to download it and try it out. The next layer is, oh, I tried this out and it was a little annoying, or the documentation didn't make sense, so I'm going to write a bug report. The next layer of that is, not only am I going to write a bug report, I'm going to submit a PR so that I can address that, right? And then you can sort of keep going in, and each one of these layers maybe involves slightly more investment, but there's more payoff from that. The next layer is, okay, you've submitted the code base, become a committer to that, right? Where now you can list that on your resume. Not only do I use open source software, but I create open source software. And that's a great way, again, to say, what's your business card? Oh, well, look, I am a committer to this project. I can talk about this project. I can consult on this project. So I'll tell you another story. This one's not about me, but it's about a colleague of mine at a company. He wanted to be a core Python developer. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's great, but you're not going to do that, or at least I kind of doubted that. But what he did was he went out and he said, okay, I'm going to pitch, I think he pitched like 8 talks to PyCon. And he got accepted because, well, when he did that, it was also a lot easier to get accepted to PyCon. But he got accepted to PyCon. And then not only that, he's like, okay, I'm going to start reading the mailing list for Python. I'm going to start reading the developer mailing list. He started reading the developer mailing list. He started participating in it. And he found something that he really wanted to work on, and he started writing patches for that. And eventually, he did become a core developer of Python. He now works at a big company on Python, and I think he makes decent money, works out of his house. But he started off as someone who no one heard about, and now he's a core developer, just because he decided that he was going to invest in himself. And I think anyone who wants to put forth that effort can do that. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be someone who's out there or super well known. Anyone who wants to do that and can put forth the effort can do that. Here are some other hints for becoming a leader. Going to a meetup or sharing at a meetup, presenting at a meetup is a great option. Learning. So learning about something is a great way to be a leader. Sharing about something, and that can be through various platforms. Blogging is a great way. Having a blog is another way. Are you an expert on something? Yeah, go to my blog. You can read all the stuff that I wrote about it, right? Blogging is also a great sort of stepping stone to writing a book. If you want to write a book, start off with a blog. That's an easy thing to do. And then you can actually take those blog posts and put them in a book. It might require a little bit of editing or whatnot, but that's something you can do. Presenting is another way to show that you're becoming a leader. Again, these are some things that can be very hard. Presenting can be something that causes people to flush or whatnot, but it is a skill that you can learn, and as you practice it, you will get better at it, and you can do that. Recently at an R conference, there was a presentation that very similar to the gist of this, but this is by David Robinson. He's an R programmer, and his talk was called the effectiveness of public work. And so this is what he said for what to do. And he listed these in order from junior to senior. So he's saying that if you're a junior person, I would start off with blogging. And then after that, I would start off with tweeting. And not just tweeting things, but actually tweeting to engage with the community that you want to engage with. If you start and I have done this as well. If you want to know someone or you want to sort of start a relation with someone, their software or whatnot, tweeting at them and responding or asking questions is a great way to sort of start that. Okay, contributing to open source, I just talked about that, sort of the onion skin of open source. There's various things you can do to contribute to open source. Giving talks. Again, it's hard to give a talk if you don't have anything to show or someone can sort of go out on a limb and say, okay, I will let you give a talk. But if you have some things built up that you can talk about, that you can prove that you can talk about, you can get a chance to give a talk. Recording screencasts. This is another one. He's sort of putting this down on more of something what a senior would do, show how they use a tool, show how something works, that sort of thing. And then at the bottom, he put write a book. I don't know that you need to be an expert to write a book, but I think that as you study something, as you explain something to someone else, you become an expert in it because you understand what you don't know, and you also understand what other people don't know. And that's what an expert is. Just some other notes on investing in yourself. So this is not like a sprint. So I'm a runner. I like to run. I typically run longer races and do trail running and whatnot. So I have run multiple 50-mile races. And a 50-mile race is not a sprint. It is basically a full-day thing where you're pacing yourself, you know what you're doing, and you're taking care of your body. If you just sprint and you're not taking care of your body, you're not going to be able to do that. Okay? So just invest in yourself as well. So take care of yourself. Make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're eating good, make sure you're getting exercise, fresh air, those sorts of things. Okay. Invest in others. So we talked about changing our attitude. We've talked about we need to be able to invest in ourselves. And I would say that an investment is a risk. There are some things that you'll invest with that they might not pay off. There are other things where you invest and they can pay off very big. But I think that the steps that I've listed, the steps that David Robinson has listed, these are sort of proven things. If you do these and you want to be an expert in something, you will be recognized as an expert in something. Okay, let's talk about investing in others, because this is maybe, if you want to sort of go from I'm an expert in something to I want to help others or I want others to pay me for that, this is perhaps the way to do that. Okay? Again, we're going to come back to our abundance mentality. You have to believe that there is enough work out there and that there is work to go around and that people will want to pay you for your work. So the Python world is a very small world. I personally know a lot of the other so I do a bunch of Python training. I personally know a bunch of the other Python trainers. Like, I have worked with them. I have done work for them. I have lunch or dinner with them at PyCon. And they also consult and they write books, and I could view them as my competition, right? Like, oh, they have all the business. There's no way that I will be able to get business because they're already out there. They have all the business. Well, you can think that way if you want to, but the truth is that there is, right now, there's more than enough work to go around. And so I would like to view these people as not as my competition, but rather colleagues. And in fact, that's what they are. They give work to me, and I give work to them. If I have too much work or they have too much work, we will hand it off to one another. And so if I view them as competition, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to interact with them because they have all the work. I mean, you can do that, but it's not going to help you. So flip your idea there and say, okay, they're doing the same thing I want to do. I'm going to treat them as someone who I can assist or help. Another attitude shift is, rather than every time you meet someone at a startup, or at a meetup or a conference or whatever and say, like, this is what I do. Do you want me to do this? Change your attitude and say, how can I help you? What are your needs and how can I help you? Sometimes it might be that you can personally help them, but if you have a network, if you have networked with a lot of people and you're at a conference like this, you can say, oh, I don't do that, but I can make an introduction for you to do this, right? I know this person over here who does do that, and they can assist you. So that is a shift that you can do that will pay dividends as well. So if you find yourself, when you're starting off consulting, you find yourself coming out to someone and you're trying to do a pitch, you're trying to say, I do Django consulting, I want to write it. Do you have a Django website I can write for you? Rather than doing that, say, how can I help you? What needs? What are your needs? You may or may not be able to help them directly, but maybe through your network you can. And as you do that, the more as you do that, your name will get out there. People will recognize you for what you are. If you assist someone or you connect someone through a network, people tend to remember that, and they tend to pay it back. Another hint is to use a mastermind group. And again, this is the idea that the idea of a mastermind group is the idea that you find people who are similar to you, who are doing things that are similar to you, and again, rather than viewing them as competition, view them as a group where you can brainstorm, you can bounce ideas off of, you can see what they're doing that's working, and leverage their ideas. They can leverage your ideas and help each other grow. So that's if you have the mentality that they are competition, that's not going to work. But if you have an abundance mentality, there's more than enough work. This is very useful to do. And I have this sort of thing where I meet with other data scientists. They have work that they don't want to do, or I have work that I don't want to do. We pass it around to each other. We have breakfast. We talk about what they're doing. We talk about, how we are working with different clients and whatnot, what sort of techniques we're using. And that is a great thing to have. It's a lot more powerful to me rather than doing everything on my own. Another way to invest in others is to invest in clients, and you can view your clients as others. So one way to invest in a client is to give a client a fair price. And you need to figure out what a fair price is for you, but basically the idea is to give them a price where it makes sense. And we can sort of talk about pricing strategies and whatnot, but if you want to get work, give them a price for a service that they can't say no to. But you should also be willing to drop clients, okay? You don't want to be desperate, and if a client isn't working for you, or if they're not a good client, they're not paying you, or they're not holding up their end, don't be afraid to say, okay, thanks, I'm going to move on. Thanks for letting me serve you. Another way to invest in others is to be charitable. Again, view that there is an abundance mentality, there's a lot to go around, but help other people rather than how can you help me? I'm going to help you. How can I help you? So donate your time. The people who are helping here at PyCon Colombia are awesome. I met a lot of them last year when I came to PyCon Colombia, but I think they're from all over the country. They're going to have a great network because they participated in helping out PyCon Colombia. And so they're going to have connections to a bunch of people that someone who's just an attendee is not going to have. Another thing that I like to do, I have 4 kids. I like to teach at their schools. There's always opportunities to teach. So have I gotten work from teaching at schools? I don't know. I might have, because I also tweet about what I do at schools, right? We program drones and we make drones fly around. So, it's possible that I have gotten work from that. Okay, a book that I've found useful is called The Coder's Path to Wealth and Independence, and it's just a book about how to start consulting. So I'd recommend that if you're interested in sort of pursuing this more. It has a bunch of good hints in there. Okay, so in summary, if you want to start consulting, or you just want to maybe get yourself out there a little bit more, this doesn't have to be consulting. It can be having others recognize you. Change your attitude. It might be super scary to get in front of other people, but you need to change your attitude. Presenting, getting in front of other people, this is a learned skill. That doesn't mean you have to be going out and greeting everyone at the conference all the time. You can take a break or whatnot, but change your attitude. invest in yourself. You need to learn how to invest in yourself. Use the correct tools, teach yourself, and then invest in others. Share with others. Look to have an abundance mentality and help others. Okay. With that, I will put the offer out here. If there is anything that I can do for anyone here, let me know. I'd be glad to help anyone I can in whatever way I can. If you want to reach out to me, probably the best way is on Twitter. I'm _M_Harrison __M_Harrison____. Again, I'll be around at the conference most of the time. I do speak some Spanish. If you prefer to talk to me in Spanish, I speak a little bit of Spanish as well. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll be there as well. So with that, thank you for coming, and best of luck investing in yourself and becoming an introverted person who is learning and sharing with others. Thank you.
Gracias, Matt. Genial la charla. No sé si hay 5 minutos de preguntas, si tal vez quieras responder.
Sí.
¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? ¿No? ¿Todo bien? Ok. Bueno.
Okay, so for me, it's kind of difficult to write a blog post because sometimes I do experiments and I want to document them, but I don't know if people is going to be interested in them. Mm-hmm. So how you overcome that feeling that, okay, this is not interesting enough for people? So that's really difficult for me.
Yeah, great question. So just like maybe my stuff is not worthy of other people to see. And again, Mr. Robinson's point was blog posting is probably the first thing you can do. And you know what? If I go and look at my blog and I look at like the first blog posts I did, I'm like, oh, those are kind of sad, right? Similarly, I think everyone has that. The first talk I did was not awesome. If you talk to podcasters, they're like, oh, if I listen to the first podcast, I cringe when I hear it, right? It's horrible. But you need to start somewhere. So you just need to decide, you know what? It might not be, but you know what? There are probably other people who are interested in what I'm doing, and it might help them. So I need to start somewhere, and I'm just going to say, yep, I'm going to do this. If people don't like it, you know what? There's always going to be haters on the internet. I hate to break it to you. And so you're just going to have to deal with that. No matter what you do, someone is going to be picking you apart or whatnot and complaining about something that you said or didn't do. Or that's how it is. But I'm sorry, that's the world we live in. But if you want to invest in yourself, you need to take that leap of faith and just do it.
Ok, gracias. Otra pregunta por acá.
In terms of a community that wants like a third world society to put their eyes in them, what tips can you give so that we can establish a new platform or a new way of thinking and development for this society that is like that is not up to date in the technology that we have internationally?
Okay, I think I understand your question. I think you're saying like you might have a situation where maybe you see people using fancy technology over here, but over here we're just starting in this technology over here. How can we sort of mesh those worlds or whatnot? Yeah, I think there are sort of two ways. One is to say I'm going to appeal to this world over here, right? And say I'm going to blog post on whatever the latest and greatest. If I'm sort of down here, I don't know what the latest and greatest is. I think investing in yourself, learning about that is a great thing. But also, if someone's down here and they're using 10-year-old, 15, 20, 30-year-old technology, that's a great place for you to be able to come in and say, you know what? Here's this really low-hanging fruit. If you did these 5 simple things or this one simple thing, look at how much money you would save or how much more sales you would have or whatnot. And if you can show that to them, that makes it a really easy sell.
Ok, listo. Muchísimas gracias a todos. Muchísimas gracias, Matt.
Gracias.